everyone. Today we have Carol Silver on the show. Welcome, Carol.
Hi, Melissa. Thanks for having me.
I cannot wait to dive into your story and your journey and your life because you are just one badass mama.
Oh, thank you so much. That's
Well,
sweet. So are you, by the way.
Well,
Please.
thank you. Thank you. You do it all. I mean, you are literally a podcaster, a TV producer, mom, infertility advocate. That's the title we're going to give you. We'll dive all into that. I mean, you have just a crazy story, crazy background, probably crazy stories to share with us too.
Yeah. It's kind of why, I mean, I debated on writing a book. A lot of my colleagues in TV are like, you need to write a book. This stuff only happens to you. And it's just, I'm always the one in a million, but I just won't win the lottery. And I'm like, that's so wrong, like.
Oh my God, you like described my life perfectly. I am such a one in the million all the time. Yeah. I'm like, how does this shit happen to me?
Totally.
I literally, I'm not kidding you, within the last month, walked into a place to get cryotherapy done on my shoulder. You know what that is, the freezing thing?
Yeah.
Walked in and I hear, no, stay with us.
No.
Wait, what? And I turn and there's someone on the floor in the back that just went down and out, like scary out. And me, I'm just like, go, call 911. And my kids are all like, and I'm all checking a pulse and I'm like, but just like one in a million shit like that.
One in a million. Oh yeah. One day I woke up and I was like, I wear contact lenses, so I'm always sort of blind, but I woke up and I'm like, I think I'm really, really blind today. Like, this is weird. Like, everything was too fuzzy. And I put in my contact lenses and nothing, I couldn't see. So I'm like, okay, took them out. And then I'm like, maybe they were bad lenses, put in new ones, can't see. I'm like, maybe I'm getting a migraine of some sort. Okay. So I throw away the contacts. I tell my husband, I have a little bit of a headache. I'm going to lay down. I think I'm getting a migraine. And then finally, he was like, I'm going to go to the coffee shop to work. I'm like, don't, because something is not right.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm sorry to ruin your Sunday, but I don't know where else to go to check this out. We're in LA at the time. I'm like, I don't want to go to the ER. It was like a Sunday morning, all the Saturday hangovers that are like filling the LA ERs. And so I'm like, let's just go to Lens Crafters. Like, that, they never let me down. Lens Crafters in Santa Monica. I always get my, glasses there. They're nice. They're open on Sunday. So we go and they're like, you're going blind. And I'm like, what? And
my God.
Yeah, I had instant glaucoma due to a migraine medicine I had taken. And to your point, I was the one, if you read the pamphlet, I'm like the 1 in 280,000 who might go blind. That's me.
Oh my God. So did you have to just stop?
Well,
and then it reversed it?
Well, we're driving from Manhattan Beach up to Santa Monica. We're going up Lincoln Boulevard. And I remember, because I didn't know what it was. I thought, am I having a stroke? Am I losing my eyesight for good? So I was going through the photos on my phone, like looking at my family and friends. I'm like, this might be the last time I see them. It was really frightening. I'm joking about it now, but in retrospect, it was awful. And then I went and they're like, you need to go right over to UCLA Stein Center, which is like the specialized eye place. And so I'm in the ER there, and they had to call in a doctor. At this point, it's Sunday night, and they like call in the greatest eye expert ever. But he came in from an Italian dinner, and he had eaten a shit ton of garlic. Okay. So, when you get an eye exam, you're this close, right? And he's just like in my face. And I'm like, okay, Carol, he's saving your eyesight. Just go with it. But I'm just like, do it. And I'm so grateful he came in, but I'm like, oh my gosh, of course. I'm like, anyway, it eventually wore off once the medicine wore off, but it's wild. It's like, and I tell people and they don't believe me. They're like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I don't ask for this shit. It just happens.
Right. I'm so glad I found my energy sister. I feel like you're my energy sister.
I'm here. I get it.
No.
And let me ask you, do people not believe your stories? Because people are like, that's not true. You're exaggerating. I'm like, I'm not exaggerating. Like,
all the time. I run this group, Busy to Bomb Fit Mom. It's like my fitness group. And like, I'm always live in it, and I'm always sharing my experiences to help coach and train them, cause I'm like, look, you can do all the things and you can still be fit. Yeah. And the stories I tell them, I shit you not. There was a story where I was driving, leaving my neighborhood, and on the corner, I knew there was a guy that lived there in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, this sounds insane. This sounds like I'm telling lies. No, and I'm leaving, I'm driving. And he had this crane that like kind of like from his truck, like picked him up and like moved and
yeah. Got it. Yeah.
Put him in.
Yeah. Helped him get in. Yeah.
Something like that. I'm getting ready to turn the corner. It fucking broke right in front of me and dropped. This probably in it.
No.
He was in the chair crane sling in front of me as I'm driving.
It's not funny. It's bad. But like, what do you do?
I could look back on it now and laugh and just be like, this is my fucking life. But like, I like pulled over and I mean, he was pretty far off the ground and he's like 165 pounds. I mean, he was like, you know, a big guy, just fucking dropped him.
Yeah.
And so I pull over and I'm like, oh my God, are you okay? And he's like, oh my God, thank God you stopped and stuff.
Of course you were here. Yeah.
Yeah. And no one else stopped.
Oh, don't get me started. Right? Don't get me started. Okay. And
no one stopped.
By the way, that's an LA thing. And I'm sorry if you're from LA, but I'm just going to tell you because as a New Yorker,
from Michigan.
Okay, good. All right. Awesome. So I can go here. I mean, first of all, was the guy okay? I mean,
he was, and I was like, lucky for you, I'm a really strong chick.
I was gonna say, I could picture you lifting him up with your muscles.
I did. I picked him up. I put him in his chair, and I'm like, this is what we train for.
Oh my, exactly.
So yes, he was okay. What's your asshole experience?
Wait. Oh yeah, mine in LA. So
yeah.
I'm walking out of getting my hair dyed in Santa Monica once again, and it's right by it's like around the block from the promenade, super busy, and this young woman, I'd say like in her 20s, and she has a toddler with her and a baby, like a toddler, like 3-ish, and then a 1-year-old. She comes out of a building, an office building. She's got a guy with her, and she goes, my baby's face is turning blue. My baby's face. So of course I look, and the baby's face is turning blue, and I go running across like Second Street into a restaurant. There's a big healthy restaurant there, something Blossoms. And I go running in and I'm like, is there a doctor or a nurse or a paramedic? And everyone's looking at me like I'm weird. I mean, if someone comes in and says that, it's like, no one said, can I help you? Call 911, so everyone looks at me like I have 4 heads. I run out, I'm calling 911. No one else is calling 911. There are women coming out of the big hair salon that I was in with the foils in their hair, and they're all just like watching. Like, oh, wow, let's see what happens to
try videoing.
Yeah, totally. There were probably some. And then, I call 911. I tell, where we are, and I hear the fire trucks coming. I'm the one in the middle of the street so that they see us. You know what I mean? And then they come, and in retrospect, I mean, my sister was like, he was choking, Carol. I'm like, I didn't know. I'm not a mom. Like at the time I was a mom, and I was so regretful to not have that, firsthand knowledge. But anyway, so the firefighters save him. Okay. Thank God. But of course the mom's upset. And then the toddler, the little like 3-year-old guy is standing there by himself on the sidewalk, just shaking because he just watched his little brother. And only one. There's 50 people around on their phones and going, wow, this is crazy.
You'll never
the only one who goes up to comfort the toddler. And I'm like, your brother's okay. And blah, 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 blah. And I know. We're meant to be there.
Right. Yeah. I'm just
Let's
like,
toot our own horns.
Right. I just attract the craziest energy and stories and stuff, Now I got to dive in because it makes me think of this, of like, all the struggles that you've had with your infertility. And this is it's such a hot topic, but such an under talked about topic.
Yeah.
And so many women suffer with this, and it happened to you. You went through it. I mean, you literally had 10 IVFs.
10 IVFs. Yeah.
6 miscarriages.
6 miscarriages.
Oh, Carol.
Yeah. And gosh, I've lost track of numbers. Like probably 3 were mine, and the others were, my surrogate, who we ended up working with a surrogate. So yeah, but all in all, I mean, it's still my baby lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh so God. Yeah. 10 IVFs. Yeah.
You have a miracle baby now.
I do.
Okay. I had to throw the happy ending in there really quick.
Always. Yeah.
What was that like going through this? I can't even imagine.
I don't know how to even answer that. I guess it's all a blur in a way.
Yeah.
But I never expected to have fertility problems. Like my mom popped out kids left and right, even at an older age back in the 70s. And she was always like, you girls are really fertile. Be careful. You know what I mean? So it was like always in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And then my sister, who's just 3 years older than me, no problem. She loved being pregnant. She could get pregnant easily. She looked fabulous. She carried great. And then she even thought, oh, I'm like 39. Maybe we try once more. And boom, gets pregnant, and then I come along, like we're talking about the freak, and with, I get diagnosed with unexplained infertility. Nobody knows why.
I
And
was going to ask, did you ever get answers or know why?
we figured it out after probably my personal most harrowing miscarriage, which was life threatening, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But because then the doctor said, like, I had one ectopic pregnancy. And when you have one ectopic, I mean, that can just happen. The baby ends up in your tube, or the embryo ends up in your tube. But then so when that happened, I had the one tube taken out. So now I'm down to one fallopian tube. Okay. And we did another embryo transfer, and it not only did it go out of my uterus through my one tube I had left, it went into my body. It attached onto an organ and was growing. And the reason why they knew it was growing was because they were taking my blood, and looking at my pregnancy numbers. And they're like, okay.
Did they know at that point that it was out?
Well, the issue was when I did the embryo transfer, every pregnancy test I took was coming back negative. Okay. There's some comedy in here, I swear. And so I'm like saying to my husband, oh my gosh, it didn't work again. I'm so depressed. Now they tell you not to take a home pregnancy test. Okay. Because they say, just don't, but everyone does. Okay. They do. Yeah. They just do. Right. Because you're spending all this money. You've got all your hopes and dreams on the line. So I took all these tests day by day. They're all negative. And then this opportunity came across from my bosses in New York. They're like, listen, there's a show in Springfield, Missouri. And it's the CEO of Bass Pro, who's like this, billionaire. And he is launching this new animal wildlife conservation museum. And he wants someone to do a TV show on it. And I'm like, and they're like, you have to go live in Springfield, Missouri for 3 weeks. I'm like, I'm not doing that. Right. And then my bosses are like, well, wait, let me tell you who his friends are that are going to be in this show. And I'm like, okay. And they said President Bush, President Clinton, President Carter, all of NASCAR, Kevin Costner. I'm like, okay, stop. I'm in, right? Luke Bryan. So I think I'm not pregnant, right? So I sign on. I get on with Johnny Morris, the CEO, from LA. And I'm like, I'm in. I'm going to come move to Springfield, Missouri. I'm going to kick butt on this show for you. And because it was so last minute, it was like 3 weeks and we had to pull up this whole thing. And so, my back to, the negative pregnancy test, my doctor in LA is like, well, you still need to come get the blood test just to make sure, and I'm like, whatever, it's negative. So I go there all sobby, take the test. The nurses are hugging me. I leave and I'm so just angry at the world. I go to Fuddruckers and I'm like, screw it. I'm just going to have the fake cheese sauce, that they have. You probably don't know because you probably don't go near this.
I've seen it.
Okay. You've seen it. Fake cheese. I'm putting ranch on my fries because I'm like, I deserve this. Right. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, and I see the doctor's office calling and I'm like, they're going to tell me it's negative. I already know. And they're like, Carol, you're pregnant. And I'm like, what? And they're like, you're pregnant. You got to, and I'm like, what? I'm like, I just ate artificial cheese and a Diet Coke. And they're like, don't worry about it. Totally. They're like, don't worry about it. And I said, oh my gosh. And I told the nurse, I said, I just committed to go do the biggest project of my life with US presidents in Springfield, Missouri. And she goes, Carol, go live your life. It implanted because it's in your blood, And she said, we'll monitor you in Springfield, Missouri. So LA doctors are working with Springfield, Missouri doctors. And it was the Springfield, Missouri doctors who couldn't find the embryo. And they kept saying, sometimes they hide and it's still early. So I'm producing the head producer on this major show. And I'm going to Springfield Memorial Hospital every other day. Okay. One morning, I'm leaving the ultrasound. I'm still in the gown, the gown that you have to hold the back so your butt doesn't show. And I see Kevin Costner calling because he wants to talk about opening the show. I go running out into the parking lot. I'm in. Yeah. I've got clothes so my butt does show. I'm in the parking lot talking to Kevin Costner of Springfield Memorial Hospital. And people are like, did this chick like escape a loony bin? But anyway, so
you're like, there's a lot to my story. Don't judge me.
Totally. If you only knew. So I'm not joking. Okay. This is the big moment. The day of my show. Okay. Luke Bryan arrives. Hello. I'm greeting him, putting him in his green room. My doctor calls from LA and she goes, I know it's your show day. I need you to sit down and give me 10 minutes. I'm like, okay. And then she told me, she goes, listen, this embryo went through your last tube. It's on an organ somewhere and it's implanted. And she said, I want you to get through your show, but if you feel any slightest pain, you are to go right to an ER. And she said, you know, and I want to let you know, you're going to be in Missouri for a while. And I'm like, well, what's a while? And she said, a month, maybe 2. And I'm like, what? And she's like, Carol, you can't get on an airplane, like, because basically it's on an organ. If the embryo were to twist, you will start internally bleeding and you need to be within a high level ER within 30 minutes or else you will bleed to death. Like you will internally bleed. God. Wait, this is 5 minutes before my show. Okay. So I'm against the wall listening to this. And she's like, so you're not coming back for a month or 2. You're going to wake up tomorrow, drive to St. Louis. I have doctors there waiting for you because St. Louis was like 2 hours away. And she's like, you know, just get through your show, but promise me, I don't care who you're producing. Like, you know, if something goes wrong, you'll go to the hospital. I said, of course, you know, so hang up. And I'm sitting there digesting the news that like I could die, you know, and no one's ever told me that before. And my co-producer, Tim, comes in. He's like, so the Secret Service is here and President Carter and President Bush are here and they need you to give them a show briefing. And I'm like, okay. And I stood up and like, I swear, Melissa, it was my I am woman, hear me roar moment. I don't think I'll ever have another one like that. And I just went and I got through the show and I was talking to 2 US presidents for the first time ever while hearing I could die. Yeah.
Right. And you could have at any moment, like while talking to them. Like,
totally. If I felt pain, I mean, yeah, they had like they would have had 30 minutes to slice me open, find it and get it out. But yeah, so that was the final, I don't even know how we got onto this, but that was the miscarriage that we said, okay. You know, my husband just the next day gave me the most heart-wrenching phone call. He's like, Carol, like God is sending us these messages, God, karma, fate, whatever you believe in, saying you are not meant to carry a baby. Like, and it's going to all make sense. You know, he's saving us from something bigger that we're not even thinking of. I have visions of me in a delivery room by myself. Like I'm done. And I said, okay. And I said, I don't know anything about surrogacy, but I'm going to be spending 2 months in St. Louis, bored to death. So I will start researching. So I did. And that took us on that's a whole nother episode. That is just the most beautiful journey of sisterhood ever.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. So that was the final straw where we were like, you know, I'm not meant to, I'm a one again, a once in a million. And that topic again, putting on if you look it up, it's so rare.
Statistically speaking, it is 1 in a million probably.
And you had said, do they know why? That was the long answer to your question, is that at that point, my doctor said, okay, you had the one ectopic in one tube, you had another one. You know, I had surgery on something near my fallopian tubes to get out like ovarian type cysts when I was very young, like 19. And they said, what can happen sometimes is that it's not scar tissue because the fallopian tubes are so tiny, they can't see in them. Mm-hmm. And they said, sometimes the scar, like some sort of scar tissue lets off a chemical that sucks up an embryo. And we have no way of detecting it. They go, but now that this has happened with both tubes, you know what I mean? And they're like, you clearly, you know what I mean? Like have that, whatever sort of chemical produces. So anyway, but here we are.
Great. Well, and I love that you're sharing and talking about this because there's been there's so many women that have their story too and been on this journey or going through it right now.
Yeah.
And it's just, they're not alone. And just feeling your story and what you went through and wow, hey, President Bush, how's it going? Like while doing that,
can you imagine?
No, but it validates them. It validates you, you know, like that's so important.
Yeah. And I did 3 episodes on my podcast on it because I wanted to put a face to it. And it's funny because my producer who I work with was like, you know, we could just do this one audio if you think it's going to be emotional. And I'm like, no, I want people to see a face. I don't care if I cry. I don't care if I get choked up. Like so many women, most women go through it silently. And I don't know
Silently.
why. I'm just like a big mouth. Like I have no problem talking about anything I've been through because I feel like fate put me through it to maybe help someone else if I make it through it, and
Right.
why not? If I went through the pain and I'm through it, why not help someone who's going through the same thing? Like, I don't
Right.
know.
Well,
It's
and
just,
maybe that's why we are the way we are, because I'm such a big mouth too. And
yes.
maybe someone listening to this is going to be at the grocery store tomorrow and they hear our episode and someone goes down and they're like, oh shit, I just heard someone talking about this on a podcast and no one did anything. I'm going to react and respond now.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Who knows what our purpose is?
totally. Well, you want to know something? One of your shows I listened to has really affected me and helped me in such a great way. And it's a simple line that I took from one of them, but every night, and I know this, being a mom and a working mom, who stays fit and everything else, I go to bed every night and I normally sit there and say, oh my God, I'm such a loser. I didn't make it to the gym. I didn't this, I didn't that. And ever since your podcast, I'm like, no, stop, Carol.
Yes.
And take stock of everything you did today. You helped a sick person. You worked on production of your NFL show. Saved a kid from choking. No, I didn't, but you know what I mean? Yeah. Like you listed out your day and you're like, you know what? And you said on that podcast, you said women do this and men generally don't. Oh, you're right. My husband goes to bed and watches reruns of Seinfeld and sits there laughing his ass off. And I'm like, you're so like, there's no thought of, oh, I'm so hard on myself. I'm such a loser. I didn't do this. It's us. We do that. And ever since your podcast, I'm like, every night you stick with me. So I wanted to let you know that.
Yay. I love it. Well, now you see my face and you've heard me. And like, I'm going to make those self-talk visions and everything even more powerful. Be standing there next to you over your bed.
Totally. Don't forget.
So I have to hear the story of your miracle baby, who is, by the way, adorable. You have a video up, I think it's a pretty recent one, of him like dancing to Michael J. Fox, right?
Johnny Be Good. My son. And the funny thing is, I mean, listen, we all brag about our kids, right? But my son, if you know about IVF, I mean, he was one of our last 2 embryos. So all those miscarriages, the doctors looked at our embryos and were like, his grade isn't high enough. You know what I mean? Like, so, and then he's just the most special child. And I swear, I always say he knows deep down, like, you people left me for last. Watch what I do in this world. You know what I mean? I'm like, he's pissed off. Like he's got the New Yorker spirit. Like, watch me.
Right.
But so we had a lovely, lovely surrogate who helped us, and she was carrying him and everything was going along great. We didn't know if we were having a boy or girl. And, it was Memorial Day weekend, I remember, and we went for a checkup and the doctor was like doing the ultrasound and just said, wow. Now, not really what you want to hear. You're like, is that a good wow or bad wow? And they're like, we think you have something called vasa previa, which means like the umbilical cord moved away. It's different than placenta previa, which is more common. It's a little bit more rare. Go figure. And it moved, the umbilical cord moved away from the placenta a little bit. So in other words, the baby could kick it at any time and the lifeline is gone. So at this point, we're pretty far along in the pregnancy. And then they're like, well, we're going to call in. We happen to be in the San Diego area. They said the vasa previa, like one of the top experts happens to be in San Diego. He researches it and we're going to have him meet with you next time. So we go in the next time, like the next week, he puts the ultrasound in and goes, wow. And we're like, oh gosh, okay. Now, and he was like geeking out because he's like, I'm doing all this medical research and like, this is like, here it is. And he said to us, you have a newly discovered vasa previa grade 3. You could even Google it and you won't see a lot. It's newly discovered. Okay.
Oh my God.
And however it was, I mean, I don't have the right wording, but however many centimeters it was pretty dire. Mm-hmm. And so our lovely surrogate just starts bawling. And she's like, I'm so sorry. We're like, why are you apologizing? Like, and inside our heads, we're like, welcome to our freak life. Like we brought you into it. So she was on bed rest for a long time, to the point where, the doctors at Cedars-Sinai said, insurance probably won't cover this because they've never seen it before. Like this is earlier than we put a woman on bed rest. And they said, but don't worry about it, because the expert in San Diego and all of us will write letters explaining to the insurance company, this is a new finding and we need to, save this baby and make sure our surrogate's okay. And so, yeah, we were on, so I drive her. You're going to love this, by the way. This is why we're freaks. So
right.
I drive her. She says goodbye to her kids and her husband, which they're going to come visit, but it's just rough. It's like,
yeah.
I drive her up to Cedars-Sinai. We get her situated and we have that 6 point something earthquake. Do you remember in 2019?
Yes.
Okay, wait. And then the next day, a 7.1, which was historic. And she looked at me. Well, she called me and she's like, you got to be fucking kidding me. And I'm like, and I said, listen, I'm like, this is my baby coming into LA saying they're ready to shake up the world. That's all I can think of. Like, I'm just spinning everything. Okay. But we're like, and I mean, a hospital like Cedars is built on rollers for safety.
Yes.
But it feels 10 times worse. So my poor, beautiful surrogate is just
rolling with it.
Rolling
Literally rolling with the punches.
Rolling with it. Totally. So the doctor in San Diego, who was the expert at Las Previas, said, listen, I don't want you going past 34 weeks because, every day it's like, it's just the bigger the baby gets, the greater the chances the kid could happen. And so at Cedars, we were getting close to that 34-week mark and the doctors took me aside. They're like, listen, your surrogate's been fine. She hasn't had one complication. Every day matters, like for lung development, even another day or 2 more days, if you're willing to keep the baby in there.
It's huge.
Or if you want to go with what San Diego doctor says. And I can't tell you, Melissa, it was like this huge maternal instinct. I said, take my baby out right now. I said, I've been through 7 years of chaos. I'm not playing Russian roulette anymore. Like my baby's fully developed. Take my baby out. And we knew the baby was over 5 pounds, which helped. And they're like, okay. So we took the baby out and we had a baby boy. And after the high-risk doctor at Cedars took me aside and he goes, I'm so glad we did that because we saw other vulnerable membranes that would never have been picked up on an ultrasound. And he said, it was more dire than we thought. And so there was like a medical researcher there and they were taking pictures. And I said, my little guy helped save babies and women and moms. Like, we'll never know them, but he was a game changer. Like he changed the medical.
I have chills.
Yeah.
I literally have chills right now, Carol.
Oh, yeah. So now he's 3 and he's like mayor of the neighborhood. Nobody knows me and my husband. His name's Wellington. Everyone knows Wellington. Like, it's like you go places, like, oh, I know Wellington. I don't know the parents, but I know Wellington. Yeah. So he is, yes. And he's an old soul. And to your point of the video, he just loves Chuck Berry and Elvis Presley and the Beatles. Like I turn on Britney and NSYNC in the car, because why not? And he's like, no, mommy, turn off, mommy. And I'm like, but it's Britney.
It's Britney.
Yeah. I'm like, what? Anyway, so
oh my God.
He's special. He's had quite a journey too.
This is why we opened the show, which I love how we didn't even plan it and talking about being a 1 in a million stuff because it just backed the story in your little beautiful miracle baby even more of like, oh my God, what you've been through. Like
I'm telling you, there's even more stuff. Yeah. It's like, and that's why
that was the tip of the iceberg.
I was going to write a book, but like, the book market's weird this day. And that's what brought me to the podcast. Cause I'm like, I want to put faces to names. Like I love seeing your beautiful face. You know what I mean? If I don't know, I just love seeing who it is. And and they're real people just telling their stories,
Yep. Absolutely. What would you say to the mom listening and the dad going through it too, but mostly the mom of like, how do you just maintain that hope? How can you keep pushing through? How do you know when to let go? Like you were saying, like, it's time, not meant to be pregnant. Let's look at other revenues. Like, what advice would you give to people?
I think that's basically it. I mean, I end my 3-part podcast on this whole thing by really looking into the camera and being kind of scoldy and adamant. And I say, you can become a parent all of us can become a parent. You just have to have an open mind, and you have to understand that, the original path, the dream of what it was supposed to be might not be your path, but your path is special and you need to embrace that. And don't listen to anyone else, Aunt Sally, who has religious beliefs, or this one. I said, screw everyone. If this is your life dream and you only live one life, do not go to your grave someday regretful because someone, changed your mind. Like, so to me, it's like, I didn't think, I'd ever not be able to carry a baby, but I had to open my mind to that. And it turned out, I mean, I worked with two surrogates. They're both like my sisters. Like, we tell secrets. They're like family to us, and it was meant to be, my path. And so that's what I tell people. I say, you can become a parent, but if you're coming saying, I must carry the baby, if you have the musts, I must do natural childbirth, I don't want a C-section, I don't want that. You want to know something? Like, then I can only give you so much hope, because shit happens, and curveballs are thrown at us in life. And I guess that was my thing. I mean, I also just, when it comes to the hope thing, and I don't know where I got this from, I really don't, but my whole life, even when I was in like, high school and the guy broke my heart, I would allow myself like 24 at max, 36 hours a morning. I would cry, I would be pissed. And then I would wake up with an F you attitude. And I'm like, you will regret that. And I just had this fire in me, you know what I mean? And the same thing happened with our story. I mean, it was hard. I mean, we had like that 24 hours a morning. It's like, there were times where we're like, are we meant to be together, even though we're happily married? You question, you have these really difficult conversations, and then we get through it and we'd both wake up like, screw this, here we go. Like, nothing, like, we're winning, And so I don't know. That's how I have always been.
Well, I love how you kind of pinpointed and brought out, like, if you have those musts, like, you're in for a long road. You're just setting yourself up, and that can be applied to
anything.
Oh my God, anything and everything.
A career, a marriage, anything. Must have this, must have that. It's like, that's not how it goes.
So many people do that. Especially even like on their fitness journey and like things that I specialize in and what I do. People are always like, oh, well, I have to weigh this. And I'm like, yeah, but bitch, like, what if we get your body fat down and you look amazing and your weight goes up, but you've created this must and it doesn't fit in the box. Open your mind, be curious. I just did a live with my group yesterday, and I was talking about the ability to pivot, and I'm like, your success and failure will be based off of your ability to pivot. Well, I have a word, it's called shivot. And that's because my brain works so fast sometimes and faster than my mouth, and I make words, and that is shuffle.
That's a good word though.
Shuffle and pivot in one, it's shivot.
I like
and it. Kind of sounds like I'm swearing, so I like it even more.
Totally. Sounds like shove it a little bit, and you're like, that's fired up. Yeah.
And I'm just like, you guys have to be able to shift it. And if you can't, and you don't, and you're not open to it and willing to do it, you are in for a long, dark journey and road. Like, and you're going to be alone too, because you will start blocking other people out.
That's right. That's right. You're right. It's with everything. It's with, we expected to live in New York and LA our whole lives and our whole careers, and in the early days of the pandemic, we had a 5-month-old, and, we were in Hermosa. It's like it's by the beach. It's beautiful, but it's a concrete jungle. We're like, we don't even have a yard to go in. We couldn't even go to the beach. So we left, and we did a shivot, I guess. You know what I mean? We did. And now we're happy. And it's you just gotta, you never know. If you would have told me 5 years ago, if you had told me and my husband, we'd be living in another state other than, California or New York, we would have laughed at you. And here we are, and we're happy. So.
Yeah. Well, and you were in New York during 9/11.
Yeah.
That is a whole, I mean, do we have time to touch on that? Because
I mean,
oh my God, you lived through one of the most memorable, and I keep wanting to say greatest times, but it wasn't the greatest time, but there were great things that came out of it. But in the history of our country, and you were there.
I was there. Yeah. I was working for ESPN. We were in Midtown, like East 39th Street. And I remember that morning I was in a cab going to work, and the cabbie has like this little screen, or at the time they did, that like their dispatcher can send them little notes, and it said, steer clear of World Trade Center area, a small plane hit the building. And my driver said, oh, a small plane hit the one of the towers. And I was like, oh, but nobody cared at first. Like,
Yeah.
And I walked into my building lobby. I'm getting in the elevator. I see some of my coworkers. I'm like, did you hear that a small plane? They're like, no, and I'm like, okay, and then I went upstairs. I told my coworker, but inside my head, I knew, I'm like, even if it's a small plane, people died. Like they went through a building. Like there's people in that building. There's people on the plane. So I'm like, this is like big, and so I went into my office and I turned on CNN. I mean, the bottom line is I can remember every minute of that day. I mean, I remember who I watched on CNN that day, Judy Woodruff, who, I mean, brought me through, so anyway, I'm in my office and I'm watching. And then of course it came across that it was an American plane at one point. And it was like, okay, shit's going down, and then my intern came running in and she goes, Carol, another plane hit. And I was like, Cheryl, you're watching the recap, and the look on her face, she's like, no. And I was like, okay. And then the big moment, even worse than that, was I looked at my TV and Judy Woodruff on CNN said, there's a large fire at the Pentagon burning and we don't know what it is. And I said, okay, I could die today. Like we could all die. Like, are we at war? Like, are they? Because when you were there that day, the whole thing was, stay away from landmarks. You know what I mean? Like look at the Pentagon and the World Trade Center. And we were, not that close to Times Square. We were right next to the United Nations. And I was like, I'm out of here. So I told my department, I'm like, let's go. I live on the Upper West Side, which has no landmarks, it's one side of Central Park. And I said, we'll avoid landmarks on the way there. We're getting out of Midtown Manhattan, bottom line. And I remember I called up to our headquarters in Bristol, Connecticut. So they're in ESPN's headquarters, very leafy Connecticut, you know what I mean? Rolling hills, so beautiful and safe. And they're like, everyone just stay put. And I will tell you, Melissa, I said 2 words I shouldn't have said to some higher ups. It starts with an F. And I said, no, like you can sit there in Bristol, Connecticut and say that we're leaving. Like, F this, we're out. And they said, okay, please write down everyone you're taking with you and, email it to us. And then we did. And we walked outside and we were on the corner and my closest coworker looked at me and she goes, Carol, I don't want to go to your place. I'm going to go down to my place in Greenwich Village. And I was like, are you sure? And she said, yes, because the whole city's in chaos at this time.
Oh, I couldn't even imagine.
And I remember this moment with her and I, because we were good friends, like looking at each other, like this could be the last time we see each other. Like, are you making a right decision? Am I? Are we both like, and it was just this moment. And so then I took who was with me up 6th Avenue because I thought, 6th Avenue has a lot of businesses and doesn't have, as many landmarks. And we were walking up 6th Avenue and I had my big Sony Walkman at the time, because I don't even think iPods or anything were out yet. If they were, I'm really not too hip, so they may have been. But I remember I was listening to 1010 Wins, which is like the all news all day, And even to this day, when I hear the 1010 Wins jingle in New York, I get like
it's a trigger.
It's a trigger. And so we're walking and I'm listening. And thank God I had that old Walkman because I could hear what's happening like in real time. And we're walking up 6th Avenue and there's a lot of financial businesses on 6th Ave, like, the JP Morgans, the big headquarters for Chase. And all these people were outside and they were looking straight down 6th Avenue downtown because their coworkers were down there. Like there were all those same financial institutions, you either worked in Midtown or down in the World Trade Center. So they're watching, on their phones, all crying. And I remember we were running up 6th Avenue and that's when all those people started screaming. And I just turned around and I just watched that second tower fall because, I mean, even though you couldn't see it from where we were, you could just see the plumes of smoke.
Oh, and hear and feel and probably everything, every sense. And you're listening to these people cry because they know they're not going to see their coworkers again, or maybe their loved ones. And so we went up to the Upper West Side and sat in my apartment and watched everything. And I mean, again, and then my mom and my sister finally got through to me and they're like, leave right now, leave New York. And I was like, F no, if this city goes down, I'm going down with her. Like, this is my home. I'm not abandoning this city. And, so
I stayed, and it's like the thing you talk about, senses and triggers and stuff. The next couple of days, the thing that stays with me is the smell. There was a smell, that kind of overtook all of Manhattan, and you never smelled anything like it, but it was basically the charred remains of a building, that was 101 stories, and the insulation and anything that went into that, the iron, you know what I mean? It's just a smell. And I went for weeks without crying. I never cried. I was in full adrenaline mode, and I woke up the next day, I went right to the fire department because they were all coming back. I mean, soot covered, from their shifts. I'm like, what can I do to help? And so I went right into, volunteer mode. And then about 2 weeks later, my mom said, hey, a friend of mine, like a friend of hers, her boss's nephew was one of the firefighters who passed in 9/11. And she said, his memorial is at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Would you mind going? Because you might see my boss there. And I said, no problem. So this is like 2 weeks after, still haven't cried. And I was going down to St. Patrick's Cathedral, and I remember there were firefighters from all over the country. Like you would see, because they had them on the bat, like, Ohio, Utah, like, and they're all rushing towards St. Patrick's Cathedral. And I remember standing on the front steps, and Giuliani showed up, Governor Pataki, Von Essen, who was the head of the NYFD, the guy who was head of the NYPD, all the dignitaries, so to speak, were lined up next to his widowed wife, who was newly pregnant, who he never even knew she was pregnant, by the way. And I remember standing there in St. Patrick's Cathedral, seeing all these, Mayor Giuliani and stuff. And then the caskets show up, and I don't know what happened, but something made me look up, and I just looked up, and on every rooftop around, I saw snipers. And that's when I lost it, because it just was this moment of our life will never be the same. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't be at a funeral looking up and having people ready to fire down on us like we're a target here. And that was the moment. And I sobbed so hard in St. Patrick's Cathedral at his memorial, and people were like, looking at me like, oh my gosh, she must have been really close to him. And I didn't know him personally. I was there on behalf of my mom, but again, being in a church sometimes brings out certain things. But that was my moment of after 2 weeks of pure adrenaline, because we had some scary things happen too. Like some idiot drove over too low in an airplane, and we all woke up in the middle of the night, like freaked out. It was, the next hit was coming. And if I could, I want to say one interesting thing too, like in that time, in the months after, I remember it was like end of October, November, I would have these moments where I was like, did my friend Joey have a baby, him and his wife married? Like I couldn't, recall certain things. And then I went to call my lifelong best friend, and I couldn't remember her number. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, that week, a letter showed up in every person who lived in Manhattan's mailbox. And it was from the American Red Cross. And it said, listen, we want to talk to you about PTSD and trauma. And they said, you might be forgetting things every day, important things, your child's birthday, you're this, you're that. And they said, this is all a part of normal mental and emotional trauma. Your long-term memory takes over and kicks out your short-term memory because it's not as necessary, so like your long-term memory is your survival skills, and that's what your body's in, and it's normal, and your memory is going to come back. So we wanted to just let you know you've been through something bad, and don't panic. And I will never forget that letter, like, because it all made sense. And I was like, okay, like
that validation. You needed that.
And how great for them, the American Red Cross, you know what I mean? To just think, like, we're not asking for donations. We're just letting the millions of people who live in New York City know you're going to be okay, and we're here. And I was like, oh, it's just a moment. But
I have to ask, because you're like this beautiful, energetic mom doing all the things that lived through this. How did you get from there and going through such a traumatic experience to where you're at now? Like, what did you do to heal through this process to get you to present day?
I don't know. I mean, I write a lot, and that could be part of it.
Oh, it's huge.
I'm sure. Yes. Yeah, it's kind of cathartic. And
like journaling, like you journal about
like I was writing, screenplays, and at that time, and I, wrote a, book, like a book pitch about a lot of these stories and stuff. Oh, cool. But I guess maybe that's it. I don't even know. I just soldier on. I don't know. I don't know, but it stays with you, and I will
Yeah.
tell you that I mean, and we all know PTSD is real. But when it kind of hits you in the moment, and because it comes when you don't expect it usually,
Right.
it's really fascinating how subconsciously our brain hangs on to all the hardest moments of our lives. And, there are 9/11s that pass, and I get a lot of beautiful messages from all the people in my life. They're like, I'm thinking of you today. And there are certain years I compartmentalize and I don't even think about it. Like I go about my life, the baby kind of helps keep me, busy, and I don't turn on the TV and stuff. And then there are other years where I'm deep in a hole of darkness and I sob, and then I pull up the 911 calls and my husband's like, what are you doing to yourself? And I said, I don't know. Like every once in a while, I think I need to remember what it was like so that I can remind other people, like, never forget that day. Like, because as time goes on, like you said, it's been quite a while, and these, younger generations never lived through it. And I will never, ever allow that day to be forgotten. And sometimes I have to bring myself through the darkest parts of it to just, live through it.
And sharing on here, this will probably air in like August or sometime just before that. And I think it's a great way to remember it and bring attention to it and help people like come from a place of gratitude too, of like, this is what these people went through. This is what our country went through. Never forget, be grateful for where we're at right now. I mean, shit might be hard right now and times are hard and stuff, but like,
I can't,
we're not there,
we're not there. And you want to know something? To your point, what scares me is that with so much anger and politics on both sides, it only makes us vulnerable to another attack. It just does. It just does. And that is what is bugging me. And I keep saying,
I know
our enemies are watching us and they're like, ha, 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 they're in fight. You know what I mean?
Yep.
They're not happy. No one's agreeing on anything. We're vulnerable. And that really pisses me off because I just think, at the end of the day, no matter what your beliefs are, everyone has their politics because of their background. It's the truth. Everyone's lived differently, and respect them. You don't have to agree with them. And that's all, but there's not a lot of that. And then we're not united. We need to be the United States of America. We need to united, we stand, divided, we fall, and anyway, that pisses me off because I'm like, we're not in a strong place right now,
No. But we have the ability to come together. Like it's in us. We can. Totally. We've done it before as a country.
Totally. So no, I know. Look at, our history and the North versus the South, and it's terrible stuff they were fighting over. You know what I mean? And we got through it. But I know it's
Well, I'm glad we talked about it. I'm glad we're uniting on this podcast.
That's right.
Sharing, exploring. I feel like I could just keep you forever, Carol. We might have to have you back because, or I'll come on your podcast. We'll keep the podcast. Keep the journey going.
Oh, please do. And you want to say we could tell our freak stories because I love doing that. Yeah,
oh
I have a lot more. I have a lot more in my back pocket. I know you do, especially living in LA, like or around LA, wherever you live, like. California, I don't know, but
for sure
it's there's always stories,
always something. Oh well, Carol, I can't thank you enough for coming on today. So many different topics and conversations, like I love it, but that's what makes this podcast so successful too, is like we just keep it raw, we're real, we're two moms, women talking, sharing, and you're just like a perfect fit for it.
Oh, thank you. And it's all about resolve and moving forward, right? I mean, just picking yourself up because life is going to throw us shit
all the time,
no matter who you are. And you can't cry about it and say it's unfair. You can for a day or two. Don't get me wrong. But, you got to just fight on.
Yes, you do. Shiv it.
Yep, shiv it. Our new word. I'll steal it from you. You're going to turn on one of my podcasts and be like, she freaking stole it. She's using it.
She just said, shiv it. Oh, well, thank you for coming on. I loved every minute. We definitely have to connect and keep this conversation again. Keep it going again.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast. Though, some of the topics were, but there's again, humor. Humor gets us through, right?
Humor, and that's life. There's no sugarcoating life.
That's right.
Well, thanks for coming on, everyone. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy.